Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Baradhare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Baradhare Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Baradhare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Baradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Janvishnavad Paramahansa Parivrajakcharyas Tadasistamad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki, Shri Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Gopremanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 21. Instructions by Maharaj Prithu. Text 35. Is that correct? 35. Pradhana Kalashaya Dharma Sangrahe Sharira Esha Pratipadya Chetanam Kriya Palatvena Vibur Vibhavyate Yatanalo Darusho Tad Gunatmaka Pradana Kalashaya Dharma Sangrahe Sharira Esha Pratipadya Chetanam Kriyapalatwena Vibur Vibhavyate Yatanalo Darushu Tadgunatmaka Pradana Kalashaya Dharma Sangrahe Sharira Esha Pratipadya Chetanam Kriyapalatwena Vibur Vibhavyate Yatanalo Darushu Tadgunatmaka Pradana Kalashaya Dharma Sangrahe Sharira esha pratipadya chetanam. Kriya palatwena vibhur vibhavyate. Yatanalo darusho tadgunatmaka. Mataji's. Pradama Kalasha Dhamasangre. Esha Pradipadya Chetanam. Tanano Darishu Tadgunatmaka. Tadgunatmaka. Pradana Kalasha Dharma Sangrahe. Sharira Esha Pradipadya Chetanam. Vyapalatvena Vibho Vibhavid. Yatanalodarishu Tadgunatmaka. Pradana, material nature. Kala, time. Ashaya, desire. Dharma, occupational duties. Sangrahe, aggregate. Sharire, body. Esha, this. Pratipadya, accepting. Chetanam, consciousness. Kriya, activities. Phalattvena, by the result of. Vibho, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vibhavyate, manifested. Yata, as much as. Anala, fire. Darusho, in the wood. Tat guna atmaka, according to shape and quality. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead is all-pervading, but He is also manifested in different types of bodies which arise from a combination of material nature, time, desires, and occupational duties. Thus, different types of consciousness develop, just as fire, which is always basically the same, blazes in different ways according to the shape and dimension of firewood. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly lives with the individual soul as Paramatma. The individual soul has awareness in accord with his material body, which he attains by virtue of Prakriti or material nature. The material ingredients are activated by the force of time, and thus the three material modes of nature are manifested. According to his association with the three modes of nature, the living entity develops a particular type of body. In animal life, the material mode of ignorance is so prominent that there's very little chance of realizing the Paramatma, who is also present within the heart of the animal. But in the human form of life, because of developed consciousness, Chaitanam, one can be transferred from ignorance and passion to goodness by the results of his activities. Kriya palatvena. A human being is therefore advised to associate with spiritually advanced personalities. The Vedas give the direction, tad vijnanartam sagurun eva bigachet. Mundaka Upanishad 1-12. In order to reach the perfection of life, or to understand the real constitutional position of the living entity, one must approach the spiritual master. Gurum eva bigachet. One must. It is not optional. It is imperative that one approach the spiritual master, for by such association one proportionately develops his consciousness toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The highest perfection of such consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. According to the body given by Prakriti, or nature, one's consciousness is present according to the development of According to the development of consciousness, one's activities are performed. And according to the purity of such activities, one realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present in everyone's heart. The example given herein is very appropriate. Fire is always the same, that according to the size of the fuel or burning wood, the fire appears to be straight, curved, small, big, etc. According to the development of consciousness, God realization is present. In the human form of life, it is recommended, therefore, that one undergo the different types of penances and austerities described in Bhagavad Gita: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Like a staircase, yoga has different steps for reaching the topmost floor. And according to one's position upon the staircase, he is understood to be situated in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga. Of course, Bhakti Yoga is the topmost step on the staircase of realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, according to one's development in consciousness, one realizes his spiritual identity, and thus, when one's existential position is purified fully, he becomes situated in Brahmananda, which is ultimately unlimited. Therefore, the Sankirtan movement, contributed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Lord Caitanya, is the direct and easiest process for coming to the purest form of consciousness, Krishna consciousness, the platform on which the Supreme Personality is fully realized. Directions for performing different types of yagyas are specifically arranged for the highest realization of the Supreme Lord, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita by the Lord himself. Ye yatamam prapadyante tams tataiva bhajamyaham. Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 11. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is realized according to the proportion of one's surrender. Full surrender, however, occurs when a man is perfectly in knowledge. Bahunam janmanam ante Jnanavan mam prapadyate. Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 verse 19. Pradhana kalashaya dharma sangrahe sharira esha pratipadya chetanam kriya palatvena vibhora vibhavyate yatanalo darushu tadgunatmaka. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is all-pervading, but is also manifested in different types of bodies which arise from a combination of material nature, time, desires, and occupational duties. Thus, different types of consciousness develop, just as fire, which is always basically the same, blazes in different ways according to the shape and dimension of firewood. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Vanchakaptarabhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha, Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Yes. Yes, so the Supreme Personality of Godhead is all-pervading, all-pervading, but that all-pervading Prabhupada does not really get into in the purport, not sort of directly, you could say, because that all-pervading really is referring to the Brahman feature, the impersonal Brahman feature, which is the spiritual energy of the Lord, or the effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's material body. So Prabhupada doesn't get into that in the purport, but what he definitely gets into is how the living entities within this material world take different types of bodies. In fact, all different, so many different types of bodies. On the basis of consciousness, yes, according to the living entity's previous association with the modes of material nature like this. Every living entity gets their body, be it some variety of human body or some variety of animal body or other types of bodies, birds and fish and insects and so on. Yes, everything is going on by higher arrangement. It's not going on by chance. In fact, the fact is that chance doesn't exist. Practically anything you can think of exists. Otherwise, how could you think of it? Although it may be sort of, kind of jumbled up or around the wrong way. Prabhupada says someone may see gold and then they may see a mountain. At night they may dream of a golden mountain. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Yes, at night they may dream of a golden mountain. And, well, there may be a golden mountain, but some things are just concoctions. The combination of different mental impressions accumulated from time to time. Yes, so, but anyway, living entities have all different types of bodies, and we just look in the room now, there's a small number of us, but every one of us has a different type of body, and they're really quite different from each other. Even identical twins, if you look carefully enough, then you see that there are differences. Yes. So, sometimes it's really difficult. I've mentioned before with the late Pankajangri Prabhu and his brother Jananivas in Mayapur, I used to not be able to tell the difference. They had slight differences in voice. So the way I told the difference was they had different watches. So I would look and check their watches. Okay. Truly, really, that's a fact. They'd come and greet me usually when I arrived in Mayapur. But then, just say Haribol or something. Haribol, whatever your name is, to be more personal about it. Yeah, but otherwise, well, just see the difference in karma. Pankajangri Prabhu passed away. Jananivas Prabhu is still living. These, generally speaking, of course they are devotees and the special arrangements of Krishna are there which supersede karma, but otherwise, just in general, even like as close to identical twins or even triplets that you could get, one sees that different things happen to them different times in different ways. Yes, like that. And it's all based on their karma, based on the influence of the material modes. The association a person or a living being for that matter has with the modes. So, yes, so they get a material body, means a gross body of a certain type. But then they also get a type of consciousness, and it's the same principle. There's the gross body, flesh and blood, etc. And then there's the subtle body, mind, intelligence, false ego. And it is as real a body as this gross, visible, material body. It is actually a body, and according to its state, the state of consciousness, then the subtle body takes different shapes. And finally, at the end of the life of an ordinary materialist, the material body will take such a shape that they'll go on to get certain type of gross body in the next lifetime. Yes, so unfortunately, it's very unfortunate, in the lower species, beginning with the animals, because they are so much, in terms of association with the three modes, they're so much in the mode of ignorance that there's very little likelihood, generally, very little likelihood that they will develop some realization, understanding of, appreciation of the supersoul, the Paramatma. Yes, if you observe animals, then the first thing, one of the first things you'll inevitably notice is that they have not figured out that it would be better, it would be nicer to wear clothes. Yeah, they just, some people, they dress their dogs, I don't know, maybe cats, I suppose, but definitely dogs, they dress them up in human type clothes. But for the dog, it's not like, what shall I wear today? Or, Janmashtami is coming, I must get myself together, what shall I wear? I remember when in the good old days, in this respect they were better, when the airport was just down the road. I was waiting there for a plane to go, probably must have been to Johannesburg, and one just dressed like this, and one sort of business type person walked up to me and just said, must be much easier making choices about what you're going to wear every day. That's what he said. And, well, it's true. Yeah, of course, Anyway, okay. So, yeah, but the animals, my Lord, like the dogs, they get dressed up. I mean, some dogs get dressed up, it seems. But to them, it's not like when we get dressed. It's just that their master has decided to do this with them, and if the dog and the master have a close enough relationship, then the dog will not object. That's really the point. Yes. So, yeah, and that's dogs who are sort of, closer to humans in terms of relationships than so many other species, even of animals. And even, sometimes dogs or some animals, but in the experience I've had, sometimes dogs become attached to devotees. And we saw one time during the first Padayatra in India, like in the 80s, one dog became attached to the Padayatra and joined the Padayatra for months and was just there on the Padayatra. And then the devotees the Padayatra came to Vrindavan, and we went with them on like Harinam in the streets of Vrindavan town, and the dog came too. But we could not take the dog into any of the temples. The temple owners, temple people would just not allow it. And so they tied up, whoever was looking after the dog, tied the dog up somewhere outside the entrance of every temple. We went, I think, to the 7 main temples, 7 famous temples, and the dog, every time, became traumatized, just completely screaming and barking and pulling, and really it was a bit extreme actually. But it was not because they won't let me into the temple. It was because I got separated from my humans who, are sort of managing my life and who I'm completely dependent on. Yeah, so it's a different sort of consciousness from not being allowed to go somewhere for some social reason or other. And I do remember actually one time, also many years ago, maybe in the 90s I would imagine, but anyway, many years ago, we just started a Govardhan Parikrama early in the morning, 6-ish or something like that. And we started from down near Radhakund, just at the crossroads there, just outside Radhakund, and off we went. And we're walking along, and after some 15 or 20 minutes or something, a pack of dogs, like half a dozen dogs, chased another dog from behind the houses just by the road, back out onto the road and across the road, chasing one other dog. So when that pack of dogs, or whatever you call a group of dogs, not a herd of dogs, what do you call them? Anyway, group of dogs. When they saw us, these human beings, they backed off. And there's only like 4 or 5 of us maybe, but they backed right off. And they left the other dog, and the other dog came running into the middle of us and then looked out at the group of dogs like, ha, 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 sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, it was really like that. And then, so off we went. And the dog went with us on Govardhan Parikrama. And the dog got into a thing. The dog really got into a particular thing. That whenever monkeys would come, which is, fairly frequently, he would chase them away. He'd really chase them away. Just go flying at them, barking like mad, and the monkeys would just disappear. And then he turned round towards us, looked at us, and it really looked like he was smiling. I mean, who knows, but it really looked like he was smiling, like, just see what I did. He's sort of helping us out, or, interacting with us. And he went the whole way, almost the whole way. I think he stopped at Radhakund or just before Radhakund, but almost the whole way. And he did that numerous times, chasing the monkeys. Numerous times. Without any clothes on. No tilak, no dhoti, kurta, etc., etc. So what is that? It's tamagun. It's mode of ignorance. Animals generally are predominantly or substantially in the mode of ignorance. One devotee once said to Srila Prabhupada was making this point on a morning walk, and one devotee said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada's sort of saying how animals are on a lower level, tamagun, like that. So one devotee said that some people have taught some dolphins to speak. And then, of course, we know that maybe you've had experience that parrots sometimes, if they're trained, they can speak. But he said dolphins, trying to make the point that these dolphins are not just mode of ignorance, just, like much lower than human beings. And Prabhupada did not appreciate that. He stopped walking and turned to the devotee and said, "But what have they done? They haven't built any buildings, clothes, same point. They haven't done anything. They're just the way they were, however many centuries or millennia ago. Although, they're also another species which sometimes become friendly with human beings. Yeah, so the thing is that in the human form of life, because of the modes, the human beings have a more elevated consciousness, more in the mode of goodness. Of course, there are degrees in the human form of life, of goodness, but the more goodness generally, the more intelligence and the more sort of capability to do things. Yes, so Srila Prabhupada makes this point that one can, in the human form of life, even though one, like a child, children are also, there's a lot of ignorance, but the consciousness develops, and if they're trained nicely, then they can become more in goodness. And if they're trained really nicely, then they can become elevated and highly developed in consciousness and actually just spontaneously attracted to spiritual life and Krishna consciousness. Yes, so Prabhupada, a point I just wanted to mention that Prabhupada mentions right at the beginning of the purport, third sentence. The material ingredients are activated by the force of time, and thus the three material modes of nature are manifested. I mean, that's just an interesting little point, well, not so little, that as we read in Brahma Samhita, when Lord Mahavishnu glances over the inert material nature in the state of pradhan, then in his glance certain things come from him, and via the glance they penetrate and they enter into the otherwise inert material nature. So one of those things which penetrates and enters is the Kala Shakti, or the force of time. And as Prabhupada mentions here slightly, anyway, he mentions here, when time interacts with the pradhan, the inert material nature, then by the force of time, the three modes of nature are manifested. Manifested means they were there, but they were unmanifest. But now they're manifest by the impact, the influence of time activates the modes of material nature. And then according to, this is at the beginning of creation, according to the different living entities' association with those modes, the living entities get their different types of bodies. So, but in the human form of life, particularly if one gets good association, spiritual association in the human form of life, then one will progress from, you could say, the ignorance of childhood and passion. And then passion, of course, as the child grows and ages a little, then the mode of passion becomes more prominent, and different material attractions for enjoyment, etc. But then gradually, if there's good training going on, then they'll come to goodness, more to goodness. And when they come to goodness, then the possibility of really developing Krishna consciousness or spiritual consciousness is there. However, Srila Prabhupada really emphasizes the importance or the necessity. It's not just important, it's actually necessary of associating with a spiritual master, accepting a spiritual master. And Prabhupada refers to a famous verse, Mundaka Upanishad, Tad Vijnanartam Sagurum Evabhikachet. What is it? Anyway, I forget the rest. Yeah, one must approach the spiritual master. And Prabhupada quotes the words, Gurum Evabhikachet. And Prabhupada then says, one must. It is not optional. And the must, if you were looking, is in italics, which means special emphasis. Even though just to say must is strong emphasis, but must in italics is very strong emphasis that it's certainly not optional at all. And Prabhupada goes on to say it is imperative. Same thing. Imperative means absolutely must approach the spiritual master, because by the association of such a person, one proportionately develops one's consciousness towards the Lord. Yeah, and ultimately pure Krishna consciousness. So, Srila Prabhupada, of course, how many times does Srila Prabhupada mention accepting the spiritual master, accepting a spiritual master in his literatures and lectures and so on and so forth? It's just really very often, but this is like a stronger than average emphasis being put on it. That's important. Yes. So then, Srila Prabhupada, in terms of, well, when the person goes through those different stages and getting the association of a spiritual master, of course there are different types of spiritual masters. So in the process of developing in the sort of direction of Krishna consciousness, before one gets there to Krishna consciousness as such, but one's spirituality is actually developing bit by bit, then one may undergo or go through other processes prior to coming to Krishna consciousness. And it's interesting, Prabhupada uses the term like a staircase. Yoga, different types of yoga, culminating in Bhakti yoga or the yoga of Krishna consciousness. So these different types of yogas, first karma yoga, then jnana yoga, then dhyana yoga or ashtanga yoga really, and then bhakti yoga or real Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada says like a staircase. Yoga has different steps. And according to your position on the steps, you're to be understood in terms of what step you're on. It could be karma yoga, so, okay, you're a karma yogi. Yes. So, of course, bhakti yoga, pure Krishna consciousness, is the topmost step on the staircase of realization of the Lord. And, it's just an interesting little point. Prabhupada does it, here he's mentioned it like this, and in a few other places he mentions, but some of our previous acharyas, they put more emphasis on this idea of the yoga ladder, these steps. I mean, not that Prabhupada is not emphasizing it, but they put more emphasis even on a sort of, to some degree, mechanical idea of going from one level of yoga to a higher level of yoga, and to another higher level of yoga, and finally to the highest level, Bhakti Yoga or pure Krishna consciousness. So, therefore, Prabhupada makes the point, according to one's development in consciousness in these terms of the staircase, the yoga ladder, one realizes one's spiritual identity. First of all, it may just be, I am spiritual, aham brahmasmi, without knowledge of relationship with Krishna. Then another stage may be realization of the supersoul. This is all sort of indicative of development of consciousness in spiritual terms. Yes, so then one may become situated in Brahmananda. That generally, not always, but generally implies a sort of, well, just Brahman type of realization. And then eventually, through the Sankirtan movement of Lord Caitanya, one comes to the purest, highest form of consciousness, Krishna consciousness, and on that platform, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is fully realized. Yes, so the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has given these different opportunities to progress and ultimately to come to pure consciousness of himself. And ultimately, the full realization comes according to the proportion of one's surrender. And full surrender occurs when a person is perfectly in knowledge. Just like we read in Bhagavad Gita, say like a little bit in the 7th chapter and a lot in the 10th chapter, Krishna gives different sort of insights as to how he can be appreciated in terms generally of material phenomena. So this is knowledge, acquiring certain types of knowledge of how Krishna is functioning. And sometimes devotees may question, or do question, not maybe so often, but some do, why all this knowledge? Why not just absorb yourself in service? This is particularly people who are more like, they have the idea of developing a particular rasa with the Lord, usually prematurely. And so they feel that this knowledge, like the knowledge of creation, the knowledge of the universal form, and all these types of knowledge, like 10th chapter Bhagavad Gita, you don't really need to worry about that. Just work on trying to become a conjugal devotee. But the thing is that all that knowledge is such knowledge of such a nature that it will stimulate our devotion. That's why it's there. That knowledge will stimulate our devotion because it's focused on Krishna and helps us appreciate Krishna more. So when a person becomes perfectly in knowledge, then full surrender on the basis or including that knowledge, full surrender is possible. And one goes back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. comments or questions? Jai Sachinandan Prabhu. It's over here somewhere.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
In the 7th chapter, the first verse, Krishna is urging Arjun, touch Trinu. You must hear what I'm going to tell you.
Yes.
He is urging him, you have to hear this knowledge I'm going to tell you. You never heard before. That's the Bhakti chapters he's speaking.
Yes, that's right.
Then
Huh.
Prabhupada said imperative that we have to accept a spiritual master. It's optional. It's non-optional.
Not optional.
But he also in the second chapter, where Arjun's subsequent surrender, Karpanya dosapata svabhava. And in the purport, Prabhupada said the material life is full of perplexities. He said, therefore it behooves one to accept a guru.
Yes.
He uses the word behooves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a term of emphasis and must. Let's do it. Thank you.
Then earlier when you spoke about the twins, identical twins, I was thinking of, Brihad Bhagavat Swami as identical twin. I don't know if you're aware of that. He lives in...
I've met him.
You met?
He lived here years ago for a little while.
Yeah. So just not so long ago he came. He had a jeans on and t-shirt, and he had a girl. And everybody thought this is Brihad Bhagavat Swami. It was the voice, the tone, everything was so identical.
Okay. Interesting.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Srila Prabhupada K.